Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots. I'm Useful Idiot. Welcome. And today I want to talk about Israel again. And this is a video I had planned on doing for a while anyway, but now seems even more important because now we have this new offensive going on, Israel against Gaza, and the misinformation and misunderstanding of these events. When you go out and see all the videos and the comments that are on them. And I've gotten numerous charges of being an anti-Semite, and I see this thrown around everywhere on YouTube, any criticism of Israeli policy. And of course, notably, there's a lot of people out there who are easily being able to defend this nonsense. But I want to do a video about this topic, and that is the idea that criticizing Israel has absolutely zero to do with anti-Semitism. And let me start off by clarifying why I, as an American, have the right to criticize Israel and criticize Israeli policies. And the main reason is because I'm a U.S. taxpayer, and a lot of my money goes to Israel. They are the 16th richest country in the world, and yet my tax dollars go to Israel. In fact, tax dollars from my grandfather went to Israel. Tax dollars from my father went to Israel. Tax dollars from me and everyone in all my extended families go to Israel. And America's children will continue to pay for Israel. So as an American, I have every right to be critical of Israeli policies. Most U.S. soldiers have died in the Middle East protecting the national security interests of Israel, not the national security interests of the United States. So that's another reason why I'm allowed to be critical of Israel. And the fact that more U.S. aid goes to Israel than any other country in the world, U.S. taxpayer dollars, is another reason why I can be critical of Israel. The U.S. taxpayers pay more for the Israeli military than Israeli taxpayers do. This is a documented fact. They now have an Iron Dome missile system, which was given to them by the United States and the American taxpayer. The U.S. Taxpayers also pay the most for the United Nations. And even though the United Nations has condemned a lot of Israeli policies. And also, I'm allowed to criticize Israel because my government is full of dual citizenship figures. So I have a lot of Israeli citizens in my own government. So that also allows me to be critical of Israel. And also, even though Jews are only 6% of the entire U.S. population, they have the most powerful and extensive lobbyist groups represented in the United States than anywhere in the world by any country. There's 53 different organizations representing Israeli interests in the United States. And I can be critical of Israel for a number of reasons. They have, just like I criticize my own government and its foreign policies, the United States has a military-industrial complex which threatens our democracy. And Israel is also run by a military-industrial complex. And just as I criticize my own government and other governments for human rights abuses and having a corrupt government, I can criticize Israel for those same practices. And compared to many, I have a more moderate view than many, but I'm also very well acquainted with secret history. But you'll find a lot more vehement anti-Zionists out there than I am. So in the midst of all this, I consider myself a somewhat moderate voice. And I only ask that Israel be judged on the same standards by which we judge all other countries in the world. And so anyway, let's get to some more of these distinctions. Well, first of all, if you're going to discuss Israel, if you want to have a rational argument, you have to stick to geopolitical history and not bring in this religious argument. Using the Bible as some sort of legitimization, or the Torah as a legitimization of the occupation of Palestine for Israelites is a dead-end argument. And so one has to stick to the historic argument, because you certainly aren't going to see too many religious arguments brought into any other geopolitical events throughout history around the globe. This seems to be one of those unique cases. And going along with that, this idea of justifying Israeli occupation of this land because of some concept of the chosen people. Well, first of all, it's quite debatable what exactly it meant to be the chosen people in the liturgy, but also the fact that it was an oral and written tradition passed on by Jewish scholars. So, of course, it's going to legitimize and validate the Jewish position. It's a book of propaganda as well as religious literature. But another reason why I don't really like the chosen people argument is it's a little too close to the master race argument or the American exceptionalism argument. This idea that a people can somehow think that they are better than or somehow more blessed or have certain rights that other people don't have anywhere in the globe is just a preposterous idea and is bound to chafe any rational person. Every country on this planet has its own pride and its own history and its own culture, its own traditions, its own languages, its own achievements. So these ideas that one country wants to somehow equate that they are head and shoulders above other nations for any reason is just a preposterous idea. And another reason why I have a problem with the whole idea of criticizing Israel and being charged as an anti-Semite is because criticizing the policies of Israel and its government has nothing to do with religion or ethnicity. It has everything to do with just an ideology and a form of government. And that's why people make a distinction between Zionists and Jews. This has nothing to do with Jews. And in fact, I want to clarify, as I've done before, that anybody that wants to level charges of anti-Semitism against me is pretty ridiculous. I've spent a great deal of my life studying the achievements of Jewish culture, and a lot of my cultural icons in art, music, literature, and political thought, science, are all Jews. I have two four-year degrees, one in Germanics and one in art history. I've spent at least the better part of 10 years, and then most of my life, studying the achievements of great Jewish figures. So this charge of anti-Semitism is just completely baseless. And the idea that anti-Semitism is restricted to Jews is also a misnomer. Because let's remember that Zionist culture is inherently a racist culture, and it's created a society in Israel that has a tangible hate of Palestinians. And guess what? Palestinians are actually Semites, so one could say that a lot of Israelis are more anti-Semites than just about anyone else in the world. And in fact, a lot of so-called Jews who live in Israel are not even Semites. They're of European background, so they don't even qualify as Semites. The Palestinians are actually native to that region and therefore are clearly actual Semites. And let's remember that with Zionist racism, the settlers who are occupying and confiscating Palestinian lands are the perfect tool for a racist Zionist government, because they're radical, they're right-wing, and they're violent. And no wonder we have the escalation of terrorist acts back and forth between Israel and Palestinians when you use these settlers as the front line perpetrating their own terrorism against Palestinians. And I also want to point out the difference between, say, Jews and Zionists and Hasidic Jews, because for the most part, I in another way, I'm not anti-Semite. I'm very supportive of Hasidic Jews. The fact that they are traditional and devout, and not only that, they have a long history in Palestine, living peacefully in coexistence with Arabs and Muslims, and also their philosophies are more in line with the religious viewpoint. They're anti-violent. They're generally pacifists. They've resisted joining the military in Israel, and they also believe that the Palestinian cause has some legitimacy, and that it is not time for Israel to confiscate this land. That prophecy would allow them in the future to get this land, but it's just not now. So that's another way. This really has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. And then another thing that's a problem with Zionism, as opposed to Jews per se, is Zionists shamelessly using the Holocaust to create an industry and use it as a political tool, and create a culture of global guilt that they use to perpetrate their policies. And it's kind of interesting that in spite of the fact that numerous cultures around the world have sustained levels of genocide and atrocities, and we can think of Armenia, Rwanda, and Russians under Stalin, and Chinese under Mao, and the Kurds under Saddam, and Kurds being slaughtered in Syria by the al-Nusra Front, and or ISIS, and or that situation in Bosnia. It's actually been 20 years now, I think, and the massacre at Srebrenica, and so 8,000 Muslims were slaughtered in Bosnia. But of course, these events do not create an industry and do not create a political tool. Or I also sometimes wonder if Israel still does business with the Catholic Church, and whether Israel still does business with Swiss banks, and whether Israel still does business with IBM. Because let's remember, IBM helped develop processing systems used by the Nazis to run the Holocaust. But does Israel still hold them responsible? Does Israel still hold Swiss banks who laundered, confiscated Jewish assets, or the Catholic Church, which ignored the Holocaust? But as it turns out, I've read material that shows that actually Israel is very forgiving of the Germans, because they realized that the Germans were no more evil than anyone else, that this could happen anywhere. And this fits in with the idea that Israel knows that Jews have been persecuted around the globe, and that Germany is not necessarily a unique culture. And then also, if you want to examine the roots of the birth of Israel, it's kind of interesting that so many people don't understand Arab and Muslim resentment of settlers coming to Palestine, and more and more and more of them coming to take over the country. Because look at how Americans react to immigrants coming from South America and Mexico, and they claim that they're coming here and taking jobs and taking over the country and having lots of babies, and all this Americans' citizens' resentment of immigrants, and yet they can't transpose that and try and empathize with the original Palestinians, when all of a sudden their country was being overrun with Jewish settlers. And then, to get back to my original point about how criticizing Israel has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, I have problems with Israel because of a number of things that I'm critical of my own government and governments all over the world about, and that is economic industrial monopolies. I think 5 large Israeli families control almost all the industry in Israel. They have a vast surveillance society, which I criticize all over the globe. They have a military-industrial complex. They have the most militarized police in the world, who have a long tradition of police brutality, the same thing that I criticize here in the United States. Their state-sponsored racism, which I am critical of anywhere in the world. There's routinely assassinations perpetrated around the globe by Israeli intelligence forces, which I would be critical of anyone doing, including the United States. They're also involved in military adventurism when they make these excursions into Syria and Lebanon, and I'm critical of the United States and other nations that indulge in this sort of behavior. Their media is controlled and censored, which I criticize in any nation, and their government has one basic ideology, this illusion that there's any choice or any actual democracy is an illusion. There's an illusion of a liberal democracy in Israel. There's only a liberal democracy for a small group of the chosen few, because racism is baked into that ideology of Zionism. And then I also look at a country the size of Israel, only 6 million people, and yet they're the country's #1 export around the globe is weapons. They're the 6th largest arms seller in the world. What a great business. They flood the world with arms, and then they flood the world with the security apparatus to deal with all the arms that they sold, because Israel is the #1 security industry in the world. They has arms dealers, security services, and consultants that span the globe. In Israel, once again, a country of only 6 million, they have 6,784 registered arms dealers, the country's largest private business sector, and there are over 10,000 security export associated businesses licenses issued. So, like I say, they sell the arms around the globe to a lot of countries, incidentally, that the U.S. Will not even sell weapons to, and then they sell the security apparatus around the globe in order to cash in on both sides of this dynamic that we have in the Middle East. So anyway, there's a lot of other things I can bring up, and I'll bring up in other videos, and that I've brought up in other videos, but there's a little rant about why criticizing Israel really has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, and now I will have this video to post. Every time someone pops up and accuses me of anti-Semitism just because I criticize legitimately the domestic and foreign policies of just one more government in the world. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.